what about these Bitcoin crypto ATMs? I mean, do you think that really is a real thing, and how prevalent is it right now?
I
And is there
do.
opportunity there?
I think there is. I know there is. I mean, there are a number of companies out there doing it today. There are a number of different business models that are being followed, and there are thousands of machines deployed today in the U.S., um, but it's still new and early, and you have to decide which business model you want to undertake. There's everything from the finders type agreements you've talked about to purchasing the machine yourself and doing everything yourself and everything in between. There's the question of whether you just want to sell crypto or buy or allow people to purchase and sell, uh, at the terminal. Whether you want to limit it just to Bitcoin, as some have done, or whether you want to provide a menu of different crypto options for it. But people seem to be comfortable using these terminals more so than just randomly going on the internet and doing it.
Okay, so I'm just going to ask questions that are interesting to me. If you guys have anything you want to ask, please raise your hand. So, what's the business model there? Is it like I get to add the spread and then you just take it if you want to use my machine, or how's that working? Or am I owning some Bitcoin and I'm doling out pieces to you? And then are you buying
It's a percentage based, typically a
percentage?
percentage based model.
Any idea like what those percentages look like?
Um, I have some idea, but I think it's probably from an antitrust perspective better not to get into
What those
the
are?
details of
Okay.
that.
And then for those types of ATMs, I'm just imagining they're dispensing cash based off of like your key that you're putting in for your Bitcoin wallet or whatever you're
Well,
using.
you're putting, first of all, there are some applications that use, for instance, LibertyX uh, has an arrangement with um, Gen Mega ATMs that allows you to go to a Gen Mega ATM, put cash in or credit card in, purchase Bitcoin, and basically you'll get on your receipt a key that you then can go online and use the key to get your Bitcoin,
Redeem that. Okay.
redeem the Bitcoin. So that's the way it works at the ATM. There are other applications that are, just crypto ATMs, and it doesn't do the traditional ATM application. It's its own terminal purpose just for crypto transactions.
Okay.
And again, a question is, do you want to allow folks to come in, put cash in, or do you want to require a credit card? What other type of information do you want to require of someone using your terminal vis-a-vis know your customer, BSA, AML type compliance requirements, so that the terminal is not misused as a way
Yeah.
to money launder that sort of thing.
Well, that's what. So when he mentioned use a credit card, I would just caution most credit card issuers have outlawed that. So you probably want to, if you're interested in that, keep abreast of those changing rules because yeah, that's been a hot topic, right? Yeah, that's tends to be a no-no. But I also see things go through, here and there until they get them locked down, like you're mentioning.
And
Um,
there are, as you say, there are banks who specialize in higher risk businesses such as crypto
yeah,
that enable these transactions.
yeah, yeah,
And they're
definitely.
specialized banks
Yeah.
that do it.
And then as far as let's just say I'm interested in that, so is the kind of the entrepreneur's business model right now? Are you identifying locations to put these types of machines, or are you buying them and placing them like traditional ATM ISOs? What does that
Again,
look like?
as with the ATM business, there are all kinds of business
Models.
models for
Okay.
this. So some of the crypto providers are just looking for you to go out and get locations and provide them with leads. They'll go in, service it, pay you a residual. Others want to sell you the terminal, have you operate it, They, in those cases, and some will help you find locations, and at a minimum will help you understand what are the parameters of the sweet spot locations for
Okay.
these things. But from some of them, I've heard it's surprising. It's not where you would necessarily think that it might be a hot spot. A lot of them have gone into malls. That's a popular placement location. But other than that, I think the industry is still finding its way as to where the
Yeah,
prime
where they go.
locations are.
Yeah, like congregation of people, right? I know because malls like cash. I mean, kind of like
Yeah,
a little bit behind us here, right? Because one of the things you brought up and one of your charts showed, which I think is super interesting, is as the dollar value goes up, then cash starts to fall off, and then it really becomes electronic. But did you ever see that thing that they did in India where they basically outlawed $100 bills and above, and it was really trying to get rid of the money laundering. But I sat there and I thought, oh my gosh, that's terrible. But then if you think about it, what do you ever really use $100 bill and above for? Right? It's usually stuff you probably shouldn't be doing. Again, in my neck of the woods, you're either probably at a strip club or you're buying drugs or something with it. I mean, you don't. It's kind of interesting study watching India go through that because there wasn't a huge impact for people that weren't money laundering and doing all that kind of stuff. So as you look at the distribution of cash versus electronic payments on Bruce's chart there, the smaller dollars are definitely more cash intensive, but overall, for just money in general, I mean, we're eclipsing 70% now on the electronic side, versus cash. But if you want to get philosophical about it, what's interesting is then you start realizing how not free you actually are without cash if it's electronic, because there's lots of restrictions put on the movement of money over the electronic rails that you really don't have on the cash side. But again, it's probably because you're doing something illicit. So need a bunch of cash, to do that kind of stuff. It's an interesting thing. Okay, and then the other thing I wanted to ask too on our questions here. So a lot of these businesses are going cashless versus the other ones are rolling out these cash discount programs. So what do you see as far as opportunities between those?
Yeah, we're in a very interesting dynamic now as digital payments come in, and some businesses have come out to be digital only, no cash accepted. And it's been very interesting to watch the political reaction to that, which has been to say that we want to maintain cash as a payment option for consumers. And in fact, there have been laws passed. New Jersey passed a state law recently requiring that retail businesses in the state, brick and mortar, continue to accept cash as payment. The city of Philadelphia adopted an ordinance to the same effect. Numerous states and cities around the country have similar legislation right now, and there are actually two bills in Congress that have been introduced, and we're working, pretty closely with Congress right now on it. And it's a transition, and the reality is there are millions of Americans who don't have a bank account and who live on cash. Our senior citizens rely heavily on cash. Youngsters need cash. When networks go down, like Target, the Target outage and other outages that have happened in payments networks around the world, when there are hurricanes, when the towers went down, et cetera, you need cash. And so people are surprised to learn that there's more cash, more U.S. currency in circulation now than ever before in history. There's more cash out there today, but it's a changing environment, and so we have to kind of figure out societally how we want to introduce digital payments and still maintain the option for consumers to use cash going forward. And I think that's our challenge to figure that out.
Yeah, definitely. And then with all these different pay types talking about that, will there ever become a time when any particular one becomes uniform or widespread in the U.S.?
Um, I'm sure there will. A big part of the reason the pays have not really taken hold here is because they're so diverse. It's all over the place. And this, in our little corner of the world, this is what we're trying to solve so that you can ultimately be able to use your phone, use different banking apps to be able to interact with an ATM and get cash. And I think that type of standardization is what's needed. In the telecom space, until we had that RJ11 jack out there, you couldn't really have competition. That's the little jack in the wall
Yeah.
that you plug your phone into, or used to plug your phone into before everything went wireless. And it's that type of commonality I think we need to see this thing take off. We're going to see something, though, I think, this year or in 2020. Visa has indicated it's going to be issuing over 100 million of the new version of the EMV cards. And those are the ones I've been talking about that are touch, tap and go cards. They have in the chip. The first generation of EMV here didn't have this. It was just the chip and you have to push it in. This chip, though, has a radio, transmitting capability in it to communicate with point of sale terminals, which are, very prolific out there now, and ATMs that are equipped to interact with NFC. So I think this is going to be a very big change in the same way that we just went through EMV coming out and the opportunity that presented you to go into these locations and give them a better mousetrap and solve their EMV issues. I think we're going to see that again now over the next couple of years as we introduce the touchless tap and go cards into the U.S. market. So I think there's an opportunity for us.
Sorry about that, guys. We have about 5 minutes left, so I'd like to make sure you guys get your questions answered. Does anybody have questions for Bruce or Chester? Come on. No questions? Oh, okay, Jeff.
Chester, one of your slides earlier said that 85% of all consumer data is unencrypted.
85% of merchants are storing unencrypted data, cardholder data.
Does that mean they're all not compliant, PCI compliant?
Exactly. As soon as you're breached, you're not PCI compliant. It's just the way it works, right? Because you obviously did something that made you get breached, and you can't be breached if you're PCI compliant. It's kind of a funny game that they play.
So we don't have any PCI police.
Yeah.
Right. Isn't it a voluntary standard? PCI?
No.
It's
supposed to be. They may say that, but if for you to have a merchant account nowadays, you have you have to have a record of attestation. Otherwise, they're supposed to turn you off.
Anyone else have questions? So one of the things that I was thinking about is, we talked a lot about how the ATM vendors are evolving and some opportunities even for entrepreneurs to get involved with your space and with that huge list of amazing things that the ATM machines might be able to do in future. But a lot of the channel partners that exist today aren't in that space. They might be, to Jeff's point, installing cybersecurity for organizations. They might be helping certain verticals, like a retail vertical is an obvious one. But what are the opportunities for them that you see as low-hanging fruit for them to segue into really cashing in on the payments, the emerging payment technologies?
Yeah, I always try to put myself in the other person's shoes, right? So if I'm out there and I'm doing the IT support infrastructure for somebody, and we all know really a lot of that's revolving around cybersecurity now. And also on the IT side, it's really changed from that break fix model to more of, a HaaS model, SaaS model, however you're doing it. But then cybersecurity has become probably one of the biggest components of that nowadays. And that's an easy conversation. Hey, we're locking this down. What are you doing for payments? That's usually what people are hacking you for. let's get that locked down. I use this gateway, know all about it. It hooks you up with a merchant account. And then at that point, I would just refer, if you don't want to play super heavy in it because you don't feel comfortable or understand it yet, I would just have a referral partnership with someone where you'd give them a call and say, hey, I have a customer that needs a merchant account. And you would hand it off, over to them, and you kind of, work it together at that point. The other thing, the advantage of PayFax is what they do is they fix the customer experience of getting or obtaining a merchant account versus the traditional route. Because the traditional route for a merchant account, as any of you know that have gotten one in their room, is, usually, let's say Kaylee here, let's say she's in an industry, so she sends me a lead, and I go, thanks, Kaylee. Now I call her customer, I'm like, hey, this is Chester from XYZ Processor. Here, you need a merchant account. I got to send you a contract. Those contracts are 6 pages, 8 pages long, and they ask a lot of personal information. You're probably going to ask you for banking statements, tax, previous tax records, on and on and on. Send me a copy of your driver's license, blah, 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 blah. You don't know me. She has a relationship with you. I'm putting you through a bad experience that's probably going to take her a week or two. Or at the end of that, cha-ching, maybe you have a merchant account, maybe not. And then once you have it, then I hand it back to Kaylee. What I handed back to her is probably not too happy customer that was happy when you gave it to me, but I just put you through the ringer, asking a lot of personal information.
So before you tell us how the PayFax do it better, I did this process about
Did you?
20 years ago.
Okay.
Is it still like that?
Totally, 100%.
Oh,
Although
okay.
it may have been, they may have automated it though, because now the contract's in DocuSign, so I can email it to you.
Yeah, e-sign, nice.
Well, yeah, it's that same process versus on a PayFac, like, hey, do you want a merchant account? I will literally light you up right now. You will walk out of here and be able to take your credit card.
So again, the frictionless experience is really what we're going for. So they should emerge.
Yeah,
the
so
victor.
I only need a subset of fields just to verify you are who you are and what bank account do you want funds deposited into. You put in your name, social, bank account number. That could be in a vendor's application. I could give them a button that gives them a little web form. I could email it to you. So you put in those 15 fields of information. All the underwriting and the AML, credit checks, all this kind of stuff is happening all automated now, where you don't need a risk department. And it just comes back and it says either approved or, hey, give her a call and, get maybe her driver's license, because we think, maybe it's not who you think it is.
So I'm thinking if I'm a channel partner who doesn't have that much experience on the payment side, this kind of a proposition that you're talking about is very attractive to me compared to the old way that, well, I guess it's the still old way, the way we do it.
The current way.
The current way that we've been doing it forever.
Yeah.
But this sounds like something that's much more seamless, easy.
Fast.
So yeah, and would be something that might be appealing. Okay. Oh.
Chester, you mentioned that Stripe, which is in your neck of the woods, has a great API. Could you take us through the criteria for what that would look like?
For what a great API looks like?
API.
Yeah. So this is more techno geek stuff, which I happen to love. I started out as a programmer at Apple Computers back in the day. So I still think I'm an awesome developer. I literally haven't cut code in 20 years, so a little delusional there. But anyways, a great API is, today it would be a RESTful type of API that's all web-based, cloud-based, versus, again, when you look at these legacy systems on the processor side, not that they did anything wrong, but you just come at it by way of, they've been in the business and they're the behemoths. So their APIs tend to be, they're still running mainframes with legacy COBOL code, right? And I would say raised data floors and all that. It's not like racks that sit in San Francisco where everything's co-located. So on the processor side, it's still going to be within their four walls. I mean, a traditional data center, and nothing can touch that. So maybe I've certified a third-party gateway that can touch it, because up until recently, you had to still have like a lease line into it. Like, they don't want any of this internet stuff touching it. And that's how they keep it secure. So Today, if you were to look at an API, it's probably going to be some web-based RESTful API that has lots of code examples and allows you to choose your dev environment. So you're using Ruby, click here, here's our code examples, copy it, paste it into your code base, and it just works. Could be a Python, something like that. But if you look at an API similar to that, like Stripe really put everybody on notice because they took all these old legacy APIs for payments and they just made this nice RESTful API, super easy. All the .com guys and cloud-based guys in San Francisco, that's what all their applications are because everything's in the cloud now, right? And then when we say it's in the cloud, does everybody know what that means? Sits on Amazon Web Services. That is the cloud. I mean, we have some late entrants, right? Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud Services. I don't know what Oracle's doing, but they'll get there at some point. But today it really is AWS. So anything that AWS has wrapped around, if you can just play with that easily, you have a pretty awesome API that people can consume relatively easily and quickly within their application. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. Our time is up, but I did want to ask where they can find you if they have further questions afterward.
Yeah. So I think ViaPay has a table. So they sponsored a table on there. There's a rip up banner. Just find me. Yeah.
And you?
I'm just here through Wednesday. I'm speaking a couple more times, so
Okay.
just grab
Excellent.
me. Happy to talk.
Awesome. Thank you so much
All
for
right.
your
Thanks,
time.
guys.
Thank you.